No one expected Earth to be anything more than a pale blue dot at the edge of a forgotten spiral arm. To most of the galaxy, humans were an outdated rumor. Primitive, emotional creatures who had barely learned spaceflight before vanishing behind a self-imposed communication blackout. The Galactic Council had archived their coordinates centuries ago. A backwater planet, not worth revisiting. But curiosity is a dangerous thing. Captain Zor-El of the Yatari Dominion had seen a lot in her time. Empires rise and fall, civilizations erased by their own pride, creatures that twisted biology itself just to win a war. Still, she had never feared a mission. Until Earth. The assignment was simple. Survey the long-forgotten human planet, assess any potential threat, and extract whatever could be useful: genetics, technology, cultural records. The Yatari didn't believe in waste. Her ship, the Valkyris, was one of their best. Advanced stealth plating, sentient AI, a military crew bred for subjugation. No one doubted they'd return. Some even joked about bringing back pets. They never made jokes again. It began the moment they entered Earth's orbit. The planet looked ordinary. Lush forests, wide oceans, scattered cities mostly reclaimed by nature. No visible energy grids, no sign of satellites. A dead world. Or so it seemed. "Scan complete," the AI hummed. "Minimal tech signatures, primitive life forms, no threat detected." They began descent. That's when things started to go wrong. It wasn't like any standard attack. There were no missiles, no warning shots, just silence. Systems began to glitch. Environmental readings scrambled, navigation spun wild. And then, crew members started hearing things, a low whisper in a language they couldn't translate. At first, they blamed interference. Then panic spread. One by one, soldiers reported hallucinations, memories that weren't theirs, visions of war, pain, betrayal. Ancient human suffering burned into their minds like a brand. Lieutenant Horrocks, a battle-hardened psionic, screamed and collapsed in the middle of the deck. "They're inside," he gasped. "The humans, they're not gone. They're watching us." Zor-El didn't believe in ghosts, but what else could it be? Still, they pressed on. The mission had to continue. She wasn't about to return to the Dominion empty-handed. She authorized a ground team. 5 elite units dropped near what used to be New York City. They lost contact within 6 minutes. The last transmission was a garbled voice. It wasn't Yatari, it was human. "You came here thinking you'd find ruins. You found evolution." That's when she knew. Earth wasn't abandoned. It had evolved. Something had survived the collapse. Something human, but far beyond anything in the Dominion's data. Not machines, not monsters, but an intelligence so adapted to war, fear, and survival, it had become a weapon in itself. The planet didn't need defenses. It was the defense. Zor-El gave the order to retreat. Only 5 of her original 80-member crew made it back to orbit. The ship was barely holding together. And even then, something followed them. Not a ship, not a being, but a presence. It lived in the AI systems now, whispering. "Tell them, tell the galaxy, Earth is awake." She sent the message. Then she ordered the ship's engines to burn a trail into deep space, away from Earth, away from the species they once laughed at. The Yatari never returned to Earth, and neither did anyone else, except one poor soul who didn't listen. But that's another part of the story. Zor-El didn't sleep anymore. Even in the cold darkness of deep space, light years from Earth, the whispers didn't stop. The AI systems, supposedly purged and reset, still glitched with strange human voices. At night, in the silence of her quarters, she would hear them. The screams of her crew, the static-laced laughter of something far older, far more cunning than anything the galaxy had faced. The Valkyries limped through the outer systems, damaged, half-mad, and shrouded in rumors. Ports refused to let them dock. Other ships rerouted when they detected the Valkyries approaching. Some called it cursed. Others whispered the word that was now spreading in black market communications and underworld forums. Humans. It was absurd. A primitive race that hadn't been seen in centuries. They were supposed to be extinct, wiped out by their own chaos. But the survivors of the Valkyries, the few that could still speak, told a different story. A terrifying one. Lieutenant Vren had clawed out his own eyes after leaving Earth's orbit, saying, "They show you things, not to scare you, but to teach you. Pain is their language, and they taught me everything." He hadn't spoken since. Jor-El submitted her report to the Dominion, but it was classified immediately. Sealed. Buried. She was pulled into a private tribunal. 10 high-ranking officials from the council, faces hidden behind shadowed visors, asked her a single question. "What did you see?" She tried to explain. About the whispers, the presence in the planet, the way it infected not through machines or biology, but through memory, through fear. It wasn't just about killing intruders. Earth had become a sentient crucible, a test of psychological warfare so advanced it bypassed logic altogether. "They evolved their suffering," she said flatly. "Weaponized it. It's not tech, it's instinct. They don't fight with lasers or brute force. They infect you with your own darkness." The council was silent. Then one of them said, "You're dismissed." No one ever contacted her again. She returned to her quarters aboard a new vessel, the Seraphine, assigned to desk duty and kept under surveillance. She knew too much, and yet they refused to act on her warnings. The Dominion didn't believe in fear. Arrogance was part of its design. But someone did believe her. Late one cycle, she received a secure transmission. No source, just a voice. Deep, calm, human. "They won't believe you. They can't. But we can show them." The message included coordinates, an asteroid belt in unclaimed space. She debated it for days, until the Seraphine's comms suddenly picked up a distress signal from a Dominion scout ship near those very coordinates. Same voice, same warning. "Tell them, Earth is awake." Zor-El hijacked a shuttle and went rogue. She knew she was risking everything, her life, her rank, her sanity, but part of her needed to see it again, to understand it. Not just for herself, but for whatever remained of the galaxy's future. She wasn't alone. The coordinates led her to a gathering of others, refugees, mercenaries, former officers, all whispering the same thing. They'd been touched by Earth, not infected, not controlled, just shown truths so raw they couldn't go back to who they were before. One of them, a scarred being named Grintal, spoke of a moment he couldn't forget. "I was in orbit, watching a city burn itself alive through old human memory archives. A boy cried over a grave. A soldier begged for death. Then the voice said, 'This is who we are, and this is how we win.' It wasn't about warships. It was about breaking something inside you and rebuilding it in their image." Zor-El finally understood. Earth wasn't a battlefield. It was a proving ground, and it had just sent its first emissary into space. He was already out there, human, alive, and carrying the infection of Earth with him. The shuttle Zor-El had taken, the stolen Dominion model with outdated stealth cloaking, was falling apart by the time she reached the fringe planet of Illith Prime. Illith was a black market trade world, where law was a loose suggestion, and loyalty could be bought with blood or credits. If there was any place to track down Earth's so-called emissary, it was here. But Zor-El wasn't here for credits. She was here because she couldn't stop hearing him. The human. Not in her mind, not a hallucination, but across comms, pirate channels, encrypted Dominion frequencies, a voice that didn't match any known registry. Calm, measured, always the same line. You found Earth. Now Earth will find you. The first night on Illith, she met with a contact, Tarn Kex, an old mercenary who owed her more than a few favors. Tarn didn't speak at first. He just stared at her with that half-mechanical eye, scanning for something. "You've been touched by them," he finally muttered, voice dry as dust. "You're not the first." "Then tell me where the human is," Zor-El snapped. Tarn leaned in. "He's not hiding. He wants to be found." That same night, 5 different mercenaries were found dead in a bar across the spaceport. No wounds, no sign of struggle, just terror frozen on their faces. One had carved a word into the table before dying. Sorrow. Zor-El felt it again. The whisper. Like a breath behind her ear, impossible to track, yet real. She followed the trail through Illith's lower rings, asking the wrong people the right questions. They all gave the same answer. "He walks like one of us. But when he looks at you, you remember every mistake you ever made." Then she found him. Not in a hidden lair, not behind a fortress of guards, but sitting alone in the center of a ruined church, drinking something foul and local. The air around him felt still, like even sound bent differently where he sat. He was human, but not as she expected. He wasn't enhanced. No armor, no weapons, just old, war-scarred skin, deep eyes that looked far too calm, and a presence so heavy it felt like gravity. "You're from the Valkyris," he said without looking up. She didn't ask how he knew. "What are you?" she asked, voice barely above a whisper. He looked at her, finally, and everything stopped. In that moment, Zor-El saw her own childhood again, starving, training, rising through the Dominion ranks. She saw the faces of those she killed, the innocents, the bystanders, every lie she told herself to justify the blood. And then she was back. Tears had slipped down her cheeks without permission. He sipped his drink and said, "I'm the message." Zor-El shook. "Message for who?" "For the galaxy," he said. "For those who think humans were just noise and chaos. We weren't." She clenched her fists. "You infected us. You're a weapon." He smiled, but not with pride, with something else, something ancient. "Number Earth is the weapon. I'm just the reminder." Then he stood. He was average height, lean, nothing remarkable. But the air seemed to part around him, like even physics didn't want to get in his way. "You still think power is about domination, numbers, firepower. But humans don't win like that. We win because we break first, and then rebuild stronger. Every pain makes us sharper. Every fall teaches us how to rise." She stared at him. "Why now? Why come back into the galaxy?" He stepped past her. "Because the galaxy forgot us, and we remember everything." As he vanished into the streets, Zor-El stood frozen. Not from fear, but awe. She didn't know what scared her more, the human's words, or how much of them she already believed. The morning after her encounter with the human, Zor-El woke drenched in sweat, heart pounding like she'd run through fire. She couldn't remember the dream. Only fragments of war and a face, his face, hovering just beneath the surface of her thoughts. She spent hours wandering the streets of Illith Prime, trying to shake the feeling that she was no longer alone in her own mind. People moved aside when she passed, not because they recognized her as Dominion, but because something about her now felt touched, different. Word had spread fast. The human had been seen. Some called him the Ghost of Terra, others the Memory Walker. But among those who'd survived contact, there was only one name whispered like a warning. Echo. Zor-El found herself muttering it under her breath without realizing. She knew this couldn't end with conversation. Not in a galaxy built on fear and dominance. The Dominion wouldn't rest until they understood what Earth had become. And they sure as hell wouldn't let a human walk around rewriting the mental balance of every species he encountered. So she sent a message. Not to the Dominion, but to the Bleak Circle, a shadow unit of bounty hunters and ex-military operatives too dangerous for politics. They didn't ask questions. They took credits. And if something could die, they could kill it. She didn't tell them what he was. Just gave a location and said, "Target is human. Highly unstable, dangerous." They arrived in less than a day. 6 of them. Fully armored, genetically enhanced, and carrying enough firepower to bring down a fortress city. She didn't go with them. She watched from a rooftop, her fingers trembling against the cool barrel of her rifle. Not to fire, but just to feel something solid. Echo stood in the middle of the alleyway where they cornered him. Calm, unarmed, same tattered jacket, same slow, patient eyes. The first soldier aimed. "Get on the ground!" He didn't move. They opened fire, and that's when everything stopped. No, not just gunfire. Time. Zor-El blinked, and the world around her warped, like gravity itself had cracked. The mercs were frozen mid-stride. Bullets hovered inches from his chest, suspended in air like raindrops in a storm. And Echo? He walked calmly between them, looking at each face, one by one. Not with anger, not with pity, but with understanding. Then the hallucinations began. Zor-El wasn't seeing Illith anymore. She was inside a memory, not hers. One of the mercs, a childhood home, a broken family, a decision that led to betrayal. And then another. Each mercenary was unraveling before her eyes, not from injury, but from remembrance. By the time time snapped back to normal, they were on the ground, sobbing, convulsing, broken. Not a single drop of blood spilled, but all of them shattered in ways no medtech could ever fix. Zor-El couldn't breathe. Echo looked up at her from the alleyway. He knew where she was. "You brought them," he said through the comms. Not angry, just tired. "You thought you could stop an idea." She whispered back, "What are you?" "I'm what happens when evolution goes inward." And then he was gone. She descended from the rooftop in a daze, walking past the collapsed mercenaries who now rocked back and forth in silence, trapped in whatever mirror Echo had held up to them. She didn't stop until she reached the edge of the city, her comm buzzing with Dominion signals. Someone had traced her stolen ship, and they were coming. Fast. But she didn't care. Because in her chest now she felt it. The same thing the others had felt. Not control, not invasion, but awareness. A crushing, undeniable clarity that every decision she'd made, every life she took, every command she followed blindly, was hers to carry. Forever. Echo hadn't given her a curse. He'd given her the truth. And that was far more dangerous. The Dominion didn't send a rescue ship. They sent a cleansing fleet. 4 Dreadnought-class warships, 2 carrier bays filled with drone squadrons, a command vessel known only as the Silence. Its purpose was never about saving survivors. It was about erasing threats, silently, absolutely. Zor-El saw them arrive from orbit, their black hulls like bruises against the stars. She hadn't even tried to hide. She sat in the dust outside Illith's perimeter gates, still wrapped in her thoughts, still haunted by what Echo had shown her. They disembarked without words, sleek soldiers in black armor fanning out across the colony, scanning for her, for Echo, for anything out of line. Civilians were corralled, interrogated, silenced with a look. Zor-El knew the script. She'd written it once. Now she was on the other side of it. A Dominion officer named Commander Ress found her sitting there. His face was sharp, artificial, surgically enhanced for intimidation. His eyes weren't his, cybernetic lenses that read pulse rates and brain waves in real time. "You look tired, Captain," he said. "And guilty." She didn't look up. "Have you ever seen someone cry without water?" He paused. "Excuse me?" "Echo broke 6 trained killers without touching them," she said softly. "No screams, no fight, just their own regrets tearing them apart. That's the enemy you're chasing." He sneered. "We don't chase, we eliminate." She almost laughed. "You think you can kill a species with trauma as its weapon?" Ress stared at her for a long moment, then signaled the guards. "Interrogate her," he said coldly, "and broadcast her confession across the fleet." Zor-El was dragged to the silence. She didn't resist, not because she was afraid, but because she knew, deep down, that this wasn't about her anymore. This was about what Echo wanted the Dominion to see. Inside the holding bay, she was hooked up to a neural interface, a standard interrogation tool. Painful, invasive, designed to extract memory and emotion by force. She'd overseen hundreds of them. But this time, something went wrong. The moment the probes connected to her synapses, the ship's systems glitched. Lights dimmed, the temperature dropped. One of the technicians screamed and tore off his helmet. "He's here!" he cried. "He's already here! Inside the ship!" The neural interface backfired. Zor-El convulsed, but not from pain, from memory. Her own, yes, but layered now with others. Echo was sharing more. She saw Earth's downfall, how humanity fractured, fought, nearly annihilated itself. And then adapted. Not through peace, not through unity, but through pain. They didn't evolve beyond suffering. They absorbed it, perfected it, wore it like armor. And when they realized the galaxy had moved on without them, mocked them, they didn't build ships. They built ideas, weapons made from stories, regret, guilt, memory, things no scanner could detect and no shield could block. Zor-El screamed, but not in fear. In clarity, when the vision ended, she was alone in the chamber. The guards were unconscious. The room smelled like metal and fear. Her restraints had been cut. A single message blinked on the wall monitor, etched in red. "You can't kill what you've already made part of yourself." Echo had been here. Inside the ship. Inside the fleet. It wasn't about physical warfare anymore. It was infiltration of the mind. And if Echo had touched this ship, this crew, then the Dominion was already infected. Not with a virus, but with doubt, with memory, with humanity. Zor-El stepped into the corridor. All was quiet. The silence wasn't just a name anymore. It was real, thick, alive. She walked past rooms full of Dominion soldiers slumped in chairs, staring into space, faces wet with tears they didn't understand. Some whispered names, others whispered apologies. The rest just wept. Zor-El didn't need orders anymore. She knew what she had to do. She had to find Echo again. Because if this was the beginning of humanity's return to the stars, then the galaxy was already at war, and no one had even fired a shot. Zor-El abandoned the Dominion ship before it tore itself apart from the inside. She didn't mean that metaphorically. By the time she made it back to the surface of Ilith, the silence had begun to drift in orbit. Systems malfunctioning, AI corrupted, crew members either dead, unconscious, or whispering nonsense in corners of darkened halls. The fleet's remaining ships didn't dare dock. They backed off silently, engines humming in retreat. She sent a final message to Commander Ress. "You tried to erase a ghost. Now the ghost lives in all of you." He never responded. Zor-El sat at a derelict shuttle outpost near the outer rim of Ilith, waiting. She knew Echo would come. Not because he was predictable, but because he wanted her to follow. He had shown her too much already to let her walk away untouched. And deep down, she knew she wasn't following him anymore. She was becoming part of the path. A low hum filled the air behind her. She turned. Echo stood there, hands in his jacket pockets, watching her like he already knew what she'd decided. "I thought you'd run," he said. "I tried," she replied, "but you were still in my head." He nodded, as if that was expected. "Once you've seen the truth, there's no going back. The galaxy is built on lies, systems that protect order, not people. The Dominion, the Council, even the rebels. They all fear chaos. But humans, we were born in it." She stared at him. "You didn't come back to conquer, did you?" "No," he said quietly. "We came back to remind them, to let them feel what they made us into." Zor-El stepped closer. "There's more like you?" He chuckled. "Not like me, worse." She felt a chill despite the heat. "And they're coming?" He didn't answer. He didn't have to. That night, Echo took her to a ship buried deep in the rusted canyon walls outside the city. It didn't look like much. Small, scarred, patched together with parts from a dozen species. But when he touched the hull, the door hissed open, and she realized it wasn't metal reacting. It was memory. Inside, the ship pulsed with energy, not from engines, but from something deeper. Stories, pain, rage, 1,000 voices whispering in languages she couldn't understand, but felt. He gestured toward the pilot's seat. "You're not a soldier anymore. You're a witness now. You've seen what Earth became, and soon others will too." "Where are we going?" she asked. He smiled. "To the center of the galaxy." Zor-El's heart pounded. "The Council?" Echo nodded. "They built a civilization on fear of what humans might become. Now, they'll meet what we did become." She sat down beside him. The ship lifted into the sky, cutting through the clouds like a forgotten memory rising back to the surface. The stars welcomed them, quiet, waiting, unknowing. And far beyond the known systems, in the dark corners of forgotten space, other ships stirred. Some large, some small, some that had been drifting in silence for decades, now blinking to life. Each of them carried someone like Echo. Each of them carried the same message. You found Earth. Now Earth will find you. And the galaxy? It wasn't ready. The Galactic Council convened in the Celestial Spire, a fortress suspended in low orbit above the neutral planet of Corvex Prime. The spire was more symbol than structure. Glass domes and steel towers spiraled high above the clouds, surrounded by defense grids and cloaked warships. It was supposed to represent unity across the stars, balance, stability. But inside, the council chambers were anything but stable. Representatives from all 27 ruling species gathered around the obsidian ring, their robes and uniforms more ceremonial than functional. Tension buzzed through the air like static. The Dominion's chair was empty. Rumors of the Silence's collapse had already begun to leak, and the name on everyone's lips, spoken only in hushed, fearful tones, was human. Ambassador Shirel of the Kuthani Confederacy was the first to break the silence. "They're returning," she said, her voice thin but firm. "And not in fleets, not with weapons, but with something far more dangerous." The Varkon High Commander growled. "They've been extinct for centuries." "No. This time it was Ambassador Threx of the Valari, a telepathic race who usually stayed above emotional debates. His eyes glowed faintly. They never went extinct. They went inward, and now something has awakened." Before more voices could join, the chamber's lights flickered. At first they assumed it was a malfunction. Until the central holo display lit up, not with the usual seal of the council, but with a face. Human. No identification tag, no encryption, just a clear, steady image of Echo. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. Every delegate in the chamber suddenly stiffened. Some gasped. Others clutched their chests or dropped to their knees. The room filled with silence so deep it felt like the vacuum of space itself had entered. They weren't being hacked. They were being shown. Each council member saw something different, personal, devastating, intimate, regrets, traumas, mistakes buried deep within their species' history, the genocide the Varkon denied, the betrayal within the Kuthani's own archives, the secret mind experiments by the Valari. The chamber became a cathedral of reckoning. And then, as suddenly as it started, the feed ended. The room remained quiet for long moments. Then, the Spire's AI system, unchanged in 1,000 years, spoke aloud. Transmission origin, human signature, location, within council jurisdiction, priority, Alpha Red, existential. Panic erupted. "They've infiltrated council space," one shouted. "They breached our mental shields," yelled another. "That's not possible." But it was, because humanity had never needed to break defenses. They only needed to remind everyone of what they were already hiding. Back aboard the memory-powered ship, Zor-El watched Echo as the stars bent around them. She could feel the council's reaction through every pulse of the vessel. This ship wasn't just a machine. It was tuned to emotion, feeding off the tremors of collective guilt across civilizations. "You just made them afraid," she said quietly. "But fear can unite them against us." Echo didn't flinch. "It always does. But this isn't about us versus them." She narrowed her eyes. "Then what is it about?" He turned, his face unreadable. "It's about making them feel again. These empires buried their pasts in data, protocol, and control. They sterilized history. But you can't erase pain. You can only forget it. And humans? We never forgot. We carried it, learned from it, let it define us." Zor-El looked out the viewport. "So what happens now?" Echo's eyes flicked towards the horizon. "Now we show them how far pain can evolve." They arrived at the edge of council space hours later. A blockade of defense ships awaited them, hundreds strong, stretched across the stars like a wall of light and steel. Zor-El expected Echo to turn back, to find another way. He didn't. Instead, he closed his eyes, and the ship responded, not with weapons, but with memory. Across the entire blockade, ships began receiving unauthorized transmissions, not just visuals, emotions. Crew members dropped to their knees, seeing things from Earth's history they couldn't process. The trenches of a world war, the mushroom clouds of ancient destruction, children hugging their mothers as the skies burned, protesters holding signs in the face of rifles, astronauts crying in zero-gravity silence. One Varkon captain shouted into the comms, "My crew's gone still. They're remembering things that aren't theirs." A pilot screamed, "I saw a little girl die and she looked at me like I was her father. Why?" Echo's ship never fired a single shot. It just moved through the blockade as if grief itself had parted the stars. Zor-El sat beside him, stunned. "You're breaking them." "No," he said. "I'm reminding them what it means to feel, and they won't stop us." As they passed the final line of defense, the stars opened before them, and ahead loomed the Council's homeworld, a shining planet of glass and gold. Zor-El whispered, "They're waiting for you." Echo finally smiled. "No," he said. "They're waiting for themselves." The Council's homeworld, Aurelian, shimmered like a jewel beneath them. It was the crown of galactic civilization. Towering cities of crystalline spires, zero-gravity transit rings, orbital gardens that hung like lanterns in the atmosphere. For centuries, it had represented peace through power, law through fear, progress through control. No war had touched its soil in over 400 years. Until now. Echo's ship descended through the atmosphere, unchallenged. Every defense system had gone quiet. Not shut down. Quiet. Like they were listening. Zor-El gripped the armrest as they passed over the capital district. She could feel the ship vibrating, not mechanically, but emotionally, as if it were sensing the tension blanketing the city below. "Are they going to fight?" she asked quietly. Echo didn't answer right away. He stood at the front of the ship, watching the skyline rise toward them. "No," he said. "They're going to remember." The ship landed in the center of the council square, a place where wars were once ended and new worlds welcomed. A massive crowd had gathered, surrounding the plaza in silence. No guards, no weapons, just representatives, citizens, leaders, and children. Waiting. Echo stepped out alone. Zor-El followed but stayed back. This wasn't her moment. It never had been. The silence was total. And then Echo spoke. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't shout. He simply spoke, and every speaker system, neural link, and biotranslation grid amplified his words across the entire world. "Do you know what made humans dangerous?" No answer, not even a whisper. "It wasn't our strength," he said. "It wasn't our science. It wasn't even our violence." He paused. "It was our ability to break, and still keep going." His voice softened. "You thought pain made us weak. That our history, our chaos, our cruelty would consume us. You thought we would die in the dirt we crawled out of. And maybe we would have, if we hadn't learned how to carry it." The screens around the plaza flickered to life. They didn't show propaganda. They didn't show power. They showed truth. Real, raw footage from Earth's past. The ugliness, the heartbreak, the resilience, children pulled from rubble, strangers sharing bread during war, soldiers burying their enemies, civil rights protests, refugees becoming scientists, mothers burying sons and still getting up to work the next day. Every second was heavy. People in the crowd began to cry. Some screamed and ran, others just collapsed in place. "This is what you feared," Echo continued. "Not our weapons, not our minds, but our capacity to endure. And now you feel it too, because everything you built, your order, your hierarchy, your silence, it was all built on forgetting." He looked up at the towering council spire. "And forgetting is over." Suddenly, a member of the council, a tall, silver-skinned Velari, stepped forward. Her voice trembled. "What do you want from us?" Echo turned to her slowly. "Nothing," he said. The answer hit harder than any demand could have. "We're not here to conquer you," he said. "We're here to give you what we were forced to live with. You erased the human legacy because it scared you. Now you'll carry it." He stepped back, and behind him, dozens more emerged from the ship. Men and women, young and old, each of them human. Some were born on Earth. Others were born among the stars, but carried the memory of Earth like a scar in their DNA. Survivors. Carriers. Echo had never been alone. They walked into the plaza, spreading through the crowd, not preaching, not demanding, just being, living, breathing proof that Earth had survived, evolved, and returned not with fire, but with feeling. Zor-El stepped out at last, and the Valari ambassador turned to her. "You were Dominion," she whispered. "I was," Zor-El said, "and I was blind. He didn't change me. He just showed me what I already knew and wouldn't face." Tears welled in the alien's eyes. "Will it ever stop? This remembering?" Zor-El looked up at the sky. "Not if we're lucky." The council didn't fall that day. It didn't dissolve or burn, but it bent. For the first time in centuries, its leaders walked among the people. Laws were questioned, histories were unsealed, monuments were torn down, not by rage, but by the hands of those who once protected them, and in their place they built archives of truth, of Earth, of suffering and survival. The message had been delivered, not with war, not with occupation, but with the one weapon no empire could defend against: humanity.